On a freezing winter evening, a little girl stood alone in the snow, her cheeks red from the cold, her boots covered in ice, and her eyes filled with tears as she quietly asked every passerby the same heartbreaking question. "Sir, have you seen my brother?" Dozens of people walked past her like she was invisible, until one stranger finally stopped. What happened next shocked even the doctors, and many believe it was nothing less than a miracle sent at the exact moment God knew they needed help. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? If this story touches your heart, please consider subscribing. Your support truly means the world to me. Thank you so much for being. Winter had settled hard over the small city of Bozeman, Montana, coating every surface in a relentless layer of frost that refused to melt even during the day. The late afternoon sun was already sinking, casting long blue shadows across the sidewalks as a cold wind swept through the narrow streets. Snow from the previous night's storm still clung to the roofs and gathered in uneven piles along the edges of the road, and each passing car sent flurries of powder drifting upward. The air carried a kind of sharp stillness, the kind that pressed into a person's skin and turned every breath into a foggy whisper. Bozeman was a beautiful place in winter, framed by distant white-capped mountains, but it was also unforgiving, especially for those who had nowhere warm to go, or no one waiting for them at home. In front of the public library, beneath the slowly blinking yellow street lamp, a little girl stood alone. Her name was Emily, a 7-year-old child with a small frame and soft features that were now tight with worry. She wore a faded green jacket, a hand-me-down that hung loosely on her shoulders, its sleeves smudged with dirt after a long day. Her cheeks were flushed pink from the cold, and the tip of her nose was red, shining slightly as she sniffed back tears. Her light brown hair, tied into a simple ponytail by a fraying elastic, had come loose, leaving a few strands plastered against her skin by the wind. Her jeans were dirty from dust and slush, but not torn, and her small boots, scuffed and stained, looked like they had trudged through miles of sidewalk. She clutched the straps of her backpack tightly, her fingers trembling. She had been standing there for almost an hour, looking up and down the street, hoping to see her brother's familiar shape among the crowd. Her 10-year-old brother, Ethan, had left around lunchtime to find something for them to eat. Normally, he returned within 20 minutes, sometimes with a bruised apple, sometimes with discount bread if a kind cashier took pity on them. But today he had been gone for hours, and as the light continued fading, the world around her grew colder and quieter. People walked past her without stopping, wrapped in thick winter coats, their eyes focused straight ahead as if refusing to acknowledge the little girl crying alone in the freezing wind. A few glanced at her, paused for a second, then turned away as though the sight of her uncertainty and fear was too heavy to carry into their warm homes. Emily bit her lip until she tasted salt from her tears. She knew her brother could take care of himself, but she also knew he wouldn't leave her this long. Every passing minute made her chest feel heavier, her breathing shakier. She wiped her nose with her mitten and whispered into the air, "Ethan, please come back." A gust of wind pushed against her, making her sway. She hugged herself, her small body trembling. That was when a tall man stepped out from the side exit of the library, brushing snow off his shoulders. His presence immediately stood out, not because he was loud or imposing, but because he moved with a kind of steady confidence that contrasted sharply with the frantic pace of the other pedestrians. His name was Michael Harris, a 42-year-old construction company owner known in town for his no-nonsense approach to business and his surprisingly gentle manner with workers and clients. He stood at about 6 feet tall, with a sturdy, well-built frame shaped by years of hands-on labor before he eventually rose to management. His face carried the firm, angular structure of a man who had spent long hours outdoors. A strong jawline dusted with neatly trimmed stubble, faint lines around the eyes from years of concentration and sun exposure, and dark brows that gave him a naturally serious expression. His short hair, dark brown with early streaks of gray at the temples, was combed back neatly. He wore a heavy charcoal coat over a flannel shirt and durable work jeans, and his boots still showed signs of dried mud, a reminder of a morning spent inspecting a new building site. Michael was known for being fair, reliable, and quiet. People who worked with him said he was the kind of man who remembered every promise he made, and the kind who carried more weight in his heart than he ever admitted. Losing both his parents young had shaped him into someone who could not easily walk away from a person in need. As he locked the side door of the library, he noticed the small green figure standing alone. At first he assumed her mother must be nearby, but the more he looked, the more he realized the girl was trembling, not from the cold alone, but from fear. He stepped closer, squinting against the falling snow. When he was within a few feet, he crouched slightly, lowering his height so he wouldn't frighten her. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice warm in the icy air. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" Emily looked up at him, her wide hazel eyes brimming with tears. For a moment she didn't speak, as though she was afraid her voice might break. Then, in a shaky whisper, she said, My brother hasn't come back. He went to find food, but he didn't come back. And he never takes this long." Her voice cracked on the last word, and fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. Michael's chest tightened. There was something about the honesty in her voice, the raw fear that struck him deeply. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Emily," she whispered. "I'm Michael," he replied. "Emily, how long has your brother been gone?" She shook her head slightly, her ponytail swaying. "A long time, since lunchtime. I kept waiting, but he didn't come." Michael looked around at the emptying street. The temperature was dropping fast. Leaving a child outside alone was unthinkable. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. "Emily," he said, "I'm not going to leave. You out here by yourself. We'll figure this out together, okay? You're safe with me." For the first time since he approached, Emily seemed to breathe a little deeper. She didn't smile, but the panic in her eyes softened by a fraction, enough for him to know she believed him. As the wind howled between the buildings and evening shadows fell over them, Michael placed a protective hand near her shoulder, not touching her yet, but offering the promise of safety. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's find your brother." And with that, their search began. Michael opened the back door of his truck and helped Emily climb inside, making sure the heater was turned up high enough to chase the cold from her trembling hands. The interior smelled faintly of pine from an old air freshener, and the soft hum of the engine filled the silence as Emily clutched her backpack tightly. Her small shoulders rose and fell with shallow breaths, and Michael could see she was fighting the urge to cry again. He took a moment to collect himself before sliding into the driver's seat. "Emily," he said gently, turning slightly toward her, "I need you to tell me everything you can. Anything that might help us find your brother." She nodded, wiping her face with the back of her mitten. Her voice was quiet, but steady. We moved here 2 months ago. Mommy said Montana would be safer, quieter. She works all the time, 2 jobs. She's hardly ever home. She looked down at her hands. Ethan takes care of me after school. This was the first mention of their mother, and Michael listened carefully. What's her name? He asked. Sarah, Emily replied. Mommy is tall. Not too tall, but kind of thin. She has long black hair and she always puts it in a bun because she says it gets in the way at work. Her skin is light brown, and she has dark eyes that look tired a lot. Emily hesitated. She's nice, really nice. But she's always rushing somewhere. From the way Emily described her mother, Michael pictured a woman stretched thin by life, someone who carried exhaustion like a shadow. He had met many people like that during his years managing construction crews. Parents who worked endless hours just to keep their children fed. He felt a quiet ache in his chest at the thought of a struggling mother who probably had no idea her son was missing right now. Where does she work? He asked. She cleans rooms in a motel during the day, and at night she works at a diner, Emily said. She leaves early and comes home late. Sometimes we're already asleep. Michael nodded slowly, committing every detail to memory. And Ethan, he said softly. He usually gets food from the grocery store? Emily sniffled. Yes. Mr. Lambert, the man at the store, sometimes gives us old bread. Ethan goes there almost every day. Okay, Michael said, starting the truck. Let's go see Mr. Lambert first. The grocery store was only a few blocks away. The fading daylight made the streetlights flicker to life as they pulled into the parking lot. Inside, the warm glow of the store spilled onto the snow, a small refuge from the biting cold. Michael parked and helped Emily out, keeping her close as they entered. A tall, older man arranging produce near the front looked up. His posture was slightly hunched, and his silver hair was tied back neatly. His name tag read, Harold Lambert. Harold was in his late 60s, with deep lines etched into his face and kind blue eyes that softened when he saw Emily. His voice carried the gentle rasp of age. Well now, Emily, what are you doing out so late, sweetheart? She stepped closer to Michael, gripping his sleeve. Michael introduced himself, explaining the situation briefly. Concern washed over Harold's face. Ethan came by earlier, around 1 o'clock, I think. He grabbed the bag of day-old bread I set aside for him, said he'd hurry home because his sister was hungry. He shook his head, looking truly worried. I haven't seen him since. Emily's face crumpled again. He should have come back by now, she whispered. Michael thanked Harold and guided Emily back outside. The next stop was the community park, a place where children often played after school. But now it was empty except for a stray dog trotting along the walkway. The dog, a medium-sized mixed breed with tan and white fur, paused when it saw them. Its ribs were faintly visible under its coat, and its tail wagged cautiously. It looked no older than 2 years. Michael crouched slightly, extending a hand. The dog approached with slow steps, sniffing his fingers before nudging its head into his palm. Hey there, buddy, Michael murmured. The dog seemed alert, glancing repeatedly toward the far end of the park, as if it had seen something earlier. But when Michael checked, there was nothing but empty snow. They continued searching, past the playground, down the sidewalk near the school, and toward a small footbridge that crossed a shallow creek. Each time they reached a new location, Michael hoped for some sign of Ethan, but each place was quiet and undisturbed. The more they searched, the more Emily's fear grew. At last, she broke down again beside the bridge. He never goes this far. Something's wrong. I know it. Michael knelt beside her, placing both hands gently on her shoulders. "Emily, listen to me. We're going to find him. You're not alone. I promise." But the truth weighed heavily on him. A 10-year-old boy missing for hours in freezing weather was no small matter. He pulled out his phone and dialed the police. Within minutes, he reached a dispatcher and explained the situation in calm but urgent detail. The dispatcher assured him that an officer would be assigned immediately and told him to continue searching while staying reachable. Hanging up, Michael straightened and looked down the darkening street leading toward a cluster of older homes and empty lots. "We've checked the busy places," he said quietly. "Now we need to look where fewer people go." Emily nodded, wiping her tears. She didn't say a word, but she clung to his hand as they stepped into the deepening twilight, the cold wind pushing at their backs as their search for Ethan carried them into quieter, lonelier parts of town. The sky dimmed into a deep indigo as the last traces of daylight slipped behind the mountains, leaving Bozeman wrapped in a harsh winter twilight. The wind picked up, carrying thin needles of snow that stung the skin and whistled through the narrow gaps between the old houses lining the quieter end of town. Streetlights flickered to life one by one, casting shaky cones of pale orange light that barely pushed back the darkness. Michael tightened his coat and held Emily's hand firmly as they walked along a narrow footpath skirting the back of a residential block. This shortcut, according to Emily, was one that local kids often used when cutting toward the older part of the neighborhood. The path was a thin strip of packed snow winding between a fence and a row of leafless shrubs, and the cold seemed to deepen the farther they went. Emily kept looking around nervously, her small boots crunching softly on the snow, her breath visible in quick, uneven puffs. "Ethan and I used this way before," she whispered, clutching her backpack strap. "He says it saves almost 10 minutes. Michael nodded, sweeping the beam of his flashlight slowly ahead. "We'll find him, Emily. Stay close to me." Though his voice was steady, tension pressed against his ribs like an iron band. The storm would worsen soon. A missing child in weather like this. Time was already slipping away from them. They continued down the trail until Emily suddenly stopped, her body freezing mid-step. "Mr. Michael," she whispered shakily. That's Ethan's." She pointed toward the right, where a patch of bushes bent under the weight of snow. Michael moved quickly, directing his flashlight into the tangled branches. There, snagged against a low branch, was a small backpack, dirty, splattered with mud, but unmistakably belonging to a child. The fabric was smeared with slush, but the faded superhero sticker on the side pocket confirmed it instantly. Emily gasped. "That's his... Mommy bought him that sticker pack." Michael pulled the backpack free, checking its weight. It was nearly empty, suggesting Ethan had already used what little they had brought with them. "This looks recent," he said, scanning the ground. Snow had been disturbed by something sliding, leaving a long mark descending toward a slope covered in brush. When he angled the flashlight downward, he saw small footprints mixed with a dragged trail, clear signs of a fall. Emily grabbed his sleeve. "Did he get hurt?" "We're going to find out," Michael answered. He knelt carefully at the edge, observing the pattern. The slide was angled sharply downward, ending near the dark outline of a shallow ditch that ran parallel to the trail. Beyond it was a narrow wooded area and a half-frozen drainage canal. Before he could examine further, a faint sound drifted through the cold. At first it seemed like the wind playing tricks, but then it came again. A weak, strained cough, echoing from below. Emily's head snapped toward the sound. "Ethan!" Ethan, is that you? She yelled, her voice cracking. Michael didn't waste a second. Stay behind me. He half jogged, half slid down the incline, gripping exposed roots and icy patches. Emily followed carefully, guided by his flashlight beam. The coughing grew louder, mixed with small, pained breaths. The beam of light finally caught the shape of a young boy slumped against the trunk of a tree near the canal's edge. Ethan. The 10-year-old boy was curled slightly to one side, his small body shaking from the cold. His jeans and jacket were smeared with dirt and snow, his gloves damp, and his cheeks pale beneath streaks of grime. His dark hair clung to his forehead, and his lips had taken on a faint, bluish tint. But despite the cold and exhaustion carving themselves into his features, he clutched something tightly in his hand. A plastic bag holding pieces of bread. Even as he shivered, he wouldn't let it go. Emily rushed forward with a sob, but Michael reached Ethan first, kneeling beside him. "Hey, buddy," he said gently, brushing snow away from the boy's sleeve. "You're okay now. We're here." Ethan blinked slowly, his eyes struggling to focus. When he recognized his sister, a faint smile tugged weakly at the corner of his mouth. I'm sorry," he whispered hoarsely. "I slipped. I tried to get back." Emily fell to her knees in front of him, tears streaming down her face. "You scared me. You scared me so much," she cried, reaching for his hand. Ethan squeezed her fingers with what little strength he had. "I brought food. See? I didn't drop it." Michael exhaled deeply, overwhelmed by the sight. The boy's loyalty, determination, and exhaustion hit him like a blow. "You did good, Ethan," he said, unzipping his coat and gently wrapping it around the boy's shoulders. "But we need to get you warm. Can you stand?" Ethan tried, but winced sharply, clutching his ankle. "I think I twisted it," he whispered. Michael examined it briefly, swollen but not severely injured. "Okay," he said. "I'll carry you." He lifted the child carefully, feeling how feather-light he was, as though the boy had not eaten properly in days. Emily walked beside them, wiping her eyes, one hand always touching Ethan, as if to reassure herself he was real. The wind howled again, colder than before. Michael held Ethan close, shielding him with his own body warmth as they climbed back toward the trail. He knew they needed to get him to the truck quickly and then to the hospital. The boy's body temperature was dangerously low. As they reached the path, Ethan leaned weakly against Michael's chest and whispered, "Thank you for finding me." Michael swallowed hard. "You hang on, kid. We're getting you home." And with Ethan safely in his arms, they headed into the freezing night. The first signs of hope, flickering like a distant, fragile flame. The sliding doors of the emergency entrance parted with a soft hiss as Michael carried Ethan inside, the boy's small body still trembling beneath the heavy coat wrapped around him. The hospital lights were painfully bright after the dimness of the winter streets, and the sudden warmth created a thin mist of condensation on Michael's sleeves. Emily hurried beside him, gripping Ethan's hand, her face blotchy from crying yet determined not to let go. The scent of disinfectant filled the hallway, and nurses moved briskly between stations. A night shift nurse approached them immediately, a woman in her early 50s with short, steel-gray hair and a calm, authoritative presence. Her badge read, "Nurse Diane Hawkins." Diane stood about 5'6", with square shoulders and a posture that suggested decades of experience handling crises without flinching. Her voice carried a steady kindness as she spoke. "Let's get him to a room." Michael followed as she guided them down the hall. Diane gently placed a hand on Ethan's forehead, her expression tightening slightly. He's very cold. We'll warm him up slowly. Sudden heat can cause shock. What happened? Michael explained in a concise, controlled tone. Fall, cold exposure, twisted ankle. Diane nodded as though she had heard 100 similar stories over the years, yet her eyes softened when they landed on Emily, who looked like a fragile bird still shaking from fear. In a small examination room, Ethan was transferred onto a bed. A second nurse entered, an efficient young man in his late 20s with sandy blonde hair and a faint smattering of freckles. His name tag read, Mark Jennings. Mark had a quiet, gentle demeanor, moving with practiced ease as he attached monitors and wrapped heated blankets around Ethan. "You're safe now, buddy," he said, adjusting the IV line. "We'll get you warm again." Emily stood on tiptoes to see her brother better. Ethan's eyes fluttered open, heavy and glassy with fatigue. "Em," he whispered, voice thin as thread. Emily leaned over him, gripping the side of the bed. "I thought you weren't coming back," she cried softly. "I was so scared." Ethan blinked slowly, trying to reassure her with a faint smile. "I only wanted you to have something to eat," he murmured. His voice broke, revealing how much the long day had drained him. Emily gently pressed her forehead to his arm. Michael stood back, allowing the siblings their moment. His throat tightened, and for a brief second, he felt something unfamiliar, like a bruise forming beneath his ribs, tender and vulnerable. He had seen hardship before, seen children grow up too fast. But witnessing such devotion between siblings this young was different. It struck him with a force he hadn't expected. A sudden commotion echoed from the hallway. Hurried steps. A voice calling out breathlessly. "My children, please. Where are they?" "Someone said my son was brought." "Here." The voice cracked, raw with fear. Emily's head snapped up. Ethan's eyes widened. The door swung open, and a woman rushed inside. Sarah. She was exactly as Emily had described. A tall, slender woman in her early 30s with long black hair hastily tied into a messy bun, loose strands falling around a face flushed from running in the cold. Her skin was a warm light brown, and her dark eyes, usually gentle, were wild with panic. She wore a thin diner uniform beneath a heavy second-hand coat, the name tag Sarah Miller dangling crookedly from her collar. Her hands were still red from washing dishes at work, and her breath came in sharp bursts as she took in the scene. The moment her gaze fell on Ethan lying in the hospital bed, her entire body crumpled with relief. "Oh my God! Ethan, baby!" She rushed forward, nearly stumbling as she reached the bedside, cupping her son's face in trembling hands. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I wasn't there. I didn't know. I should have been home. I should have—" Her voice dissolved into choked sobs. Ethan weakly reached for her wrist. "Mom, I fell. I'm okay now." Then Emily soared into her mother's arms, crying into her coat. Sarah wrapped both children against her chest, rocking them instinctively as if trying to erase all fear with the force of her embrace. Her tears fell quickly, catching the hospital lights like tiny shards of glass. Michael stepped back even further, giving them space. The reunion was raw, intimate, the kind of moment that pulled at the heart without permission. Diane, the nurse, paused quietly in the doorway, observing the scene with a soft, understanding expression. Even Mark, who was usually focused and efficient, let his shoulders relax, moved by the fierce love before him. Eventually, Sarah lifted her eyes toward Michael. Her face was streaked with tears, but determination shone beneath them. You, you're the one who found them, she said, her voice unsteady yet full of sincerity. I don't, I don't know how to thank you. I should have been there. I should have protected my children. Michael shook his head gently. You're doing everything you can, he said. You work hard for them. Sometimes life is unfair, but your kids are safe now. That's what matters. Sarah looked at her children again, her expression folding with guilt and gratitude. I thought I lost him, she whispered. Michael's chest tightened. After a moment, he said quietly, You didn't. They're strong kids, and you're a strong mother. Sarah nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. As Ethan drifted into a healing sleep and Emily curled beside him, Sarah placed a protective arm around both children. Michael stood in the corner, the weight in his heart both heavy and strangely hopeful. The crisis was not over, but the worst was behind them. And for the first time that night, warmth, not just from the hospital lights, but from something deeper, settled over them all. The morning sunlight filtered weakly through the thin hospital curtains, casting soft gold over the room where Ethan slept soundly for the first time in hours. His breathing was steadier now, no longer strained by cold or fear. Emily sat curled beside him on the bed, her head resting gently on his arm, while Sarah sat in the chair next to them, still holding her children with a protective tenderness that hadn't eased since the night before. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but there was a quiet peace in them now, a fragile peace, but real. Michael stood near the doorway, arms lightly folded, watching the small family with a mixture of relief and something deeper that he couldn't quite name. The hospital's early morning bustle hummed beyond the door. Footsteps, rolling carts, murmured conversations. But inside this room, time felt slower, gentler. Sarah looked up when she noticed Michael and offered a tired smile. She looked different in the daylight, still slender and worn from years of double shifts, still with her long black hair loosely tied, still with the same tired eyes, but there was a renewed softness in her expression, as though the worst storm had passed. Thank you, she said quietly. For everything. Michael shook his head. You don't need to thank me. Anyone would have helped. Sarah gave a small, almost sad smile. No, they wouldn't have. People walk past us all the time. Not everyone stops. She brushed a strand of hair from Emily's forehead. Last night, you didn't just help my son. You saved my family. Michael hesitated, unused to such vulnerability from someone he hardly knew. But seeing the sincerity in her eyes, he found himself speaking honestly. I couldn't just walk away, not from kids going through what they shouldn't have to, not from a mother doing everything alone. Sarah lowered her gaze, guilt flickering over her features. I try, she whispered. I work as much as I can, but it's never enough. Rent, food, school supplies, winter clothes. I'm always choosing which bill can wait. I hate that my kids are growing up like this. And yet, Michael said, stepping closer, your kids adore you. They're strong because of you. You've done more than you think. She looked up again, and this time her eyes shone with gratitude rather than shame. A soft knock interrupted the quiet moment. The door opened to reveal a middle-aged doctor with short, sandy brown hair and rectangular glasses. Dr. Leonard Clark, a man in his late 40s with a calm face and a slightly stooped posture from years leaning over patients, stepped inside holding a clipboard. His gentle smile suggested someone who had delivered both good news and bad countless times. Good morning, he said warmly. I'm Dr. Clark. I checked on Ethan earlier. He'll need rest, fluids, and a week to recover the ankle, but he's stable. You can take him home this afternoon." Sarah nodded gratefully. "Thank you so much." After the doctor left, the room fell into a thoughtful silence. Michael cleared his throat. "Sarah, I know this might sound forward, but I want to help more." He spoke slowly, carefully. "I know what it feels like to grow up without stability. My parents died when I was young. I bounced between relatives, different houses, different rules. I never forgot what it felt like to need help and not know who to ask." Sarah's eyes softened with deeper understanding. "I have an apartment," Michael continued. "A small place I use when job sites are far from home. It's empty right now, warm, safe, fully furnished. I'd like to let you and the kids stay there for a while, free of charge, until you get things sorted." Sarah's lips parted in surprise. I can't accept something that big." "It's not charity," Michael said firmly. "It's a chance, a temporary one. Everyone deserves at least one." Tears filled Sarah's eyes again, but this time they were gentle, grateful tears. Emily, who had been listening quietly, looked at Michael with innocent trust. "Is it warm?" she asked softly. Michael smiled. "Yes, very warm." Ethan, half awake, mumbled, "Can we really stay somewhere warm?" Sarah stroked his hair, her voice trembling. "Yes, baby. I think we can." Michael wasn't finished. "And I have a friend who owns a home services company. He's looking for reliable employees, flexible hours, good pay. I already told him about you. You can meet him tomorrow if you want." Sarah covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed. "Why would you do all this for us?" Michael thought for a moment before answering. "Because last night I realized something. Helping one family might not change the whole world, but it can change theirs. And that's enough." Sarah broke down quietly, leaning forward to hug both her children. Emily wrapped her arms around her mother. Ethan squeezed her hand. For a long while they simply held each other as sunlight warmed the walls. Later that afternoon, Michael helped Sarah gather the children's few belongings. They left the hospital together, stepping into the crisp winter air, not as three people weighed down by fear, but as a family given a chance to breathe again. Michael drove them across town to a modest but cozy apartment complex. The unit he unlocked for them was small but clean, furnished with soft blankets, a working heater, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of coffee and pine. As they stood inside the warm entryway, Emily whispered, "It feels like a real home." Sarah turned to Michael, tears in her eyes. This is hope." Michael smiled softly. "Then it's yours." And as snow began to fall gently outside the window, it felt, finally, like the beginning of something new. Sometimes in life, miracles don't arrive with thunder, bright lights, or grand signs from the heavens. Sometimes they come quietly in the form of a stranger who decides to stop, to notice, and to care. Michael didn't know those children. He didn't owe them anything. Yet on a freezing Montana night, he chose kindness over convenience, compassion over indifference, and in that small choice, God's grace found a way to work. Many people say miracles no longer happen, but maybe miracles were never meant to be rare events. Maybe they are simple moments when God touches the world through ordinary people, through a helping hand, a warm coat, a ride to safety, through someone who chooses love when it's easier to walk away. In our busy lives, we often forget that someone out there is praying for exactly the thing we're capable of giving. A warm meal, a kind word, a moment of attention, a little act of love that changes everything. So today, I hope this story reminds you, God still moves. God still works. And his miracles often come disguised as people like you. If this story touched your heart, please share it so others may feel a little hope today. Leave a comment with your thoughts, or tell us if you've ever experienced a moment where God placed someone in your path right when you needed them most. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us spread more stories of kindness, faith, and healing. May God bless you, protect your family, and guide your steps every single day. And may you always be ready to be someone's miracle.